NFL season.
Yeah, free agency obviously starts essentially next Monday with the legal negotiation period. So, that'll clarify things further as far as how far they go to draft proof the roster, so to speak. Um, you always want to fill as many holes with at least competent players so you don't feel the need to reach. Um, right now, we were talking before we went on the air, the biggest potential reach position because they don't have anybody is tight end right now. All three mean tight ends from last season are unrestricted free agents, so got to make decisions there. Have a couple futures guys, EJ Jenkins, Shaheem Bell, but obviously you're not going to count on them. So, that's a rare position where kind of Howie has left himself open ended a little bit. So clearly he's going to bring in some bodies in free agency at tight end. They might not be big names like fans want, but if you're not able to get Dallas Goedert back, um, but you need role players, and so it might be a blocking tight end. It might be something of that nature. A third tight end who can play on special teams. You might bring Kylen Granson back because that's Kylen Granson, who's a great special teams player. But you need bodies at that position, and they're obviously going to draft one, maybe two. They'll bring in some undrafted free agents, so they'll populate the offseason roster. But very rarely do they go into a season where you say, "Wow, they don't have anybody." And that's where they are at tight end right now.
Yeah, no doubt about it, John. And for those who missed it yesterday, Matthew Berry put out his 35 notables based on what he heard from the NFL Combine. He's with NBC Sports. For those who don't know, Matthew Berry, not a reporter, but a pretty credible guy. He put out this. While many of the Eagles' headlines these days are about whether A.J. Brown will stay or go, one player I'm told that will definitely be moving on from Philly this offseason is Dallas Goedert. Now, that's what Matthew Berry put out. I don't know if that's going to come to fruition or not, but John has started to gain a little confidence that, hey, maybe Goedert ends up back in Philly, which I think would be a good thing with the, potential changes happening this offseason. What do you make of that latest update from Matthew Berry? And, man, as you just laid out, John, without Dallas Goedert, man, it looks bleak at that position. Now, I know you got a whole offseason in front of you, and I'm sure Howie's going to do some things to clean it up. But I won't feel too good, John, if the plan is a bunch of draft picks and Kylen Granson. I'll say that.
Well, it depends on the draft picks. I think, Kenyon Sadiq would excite some people with his athleticism.
I mean, you're going to rely on a rookie to replace. I don't know. I get it. He's a good player, but one, I don't see him drafting a tight end that high. And two,
either do I. But
putting a lot of stock in a rookie,
Well, it happens. It happens all over the league. I mean, Sam Laporta's a guy that Daniel Jeremiah compared Max Clare to, or Clare. However you pronounce it, we'll ask Ian later. Laporta just took the league by storm as a rookie. You're like, what's Detroit going to do? And he's a second-round pick. I mean, it happens. I wouldn't completely rule it out when you look at a pretty deep draft when it comes to the tight ends. If you hit the right position, if you hit the right player, he can play right away. And I think they'll draft a tight end right now as we speak. Certainly by the end of day 2, I would think. And yeah, you probably don't feel comfortable about it, but I always thought it was a small window for Dallas Goedert to return to begin with. It would have to be a 1-year deal, probably less than he made last year. So coming off a 13 touchdown season, people get enamored with that. And I don't think he played that well overall, but a lot of observers get blinded by the touchdowns. He typically has been a pretty good blocker and kind of fell apart in that aspect of the game, which was a big deal for the Eagles because couldn't set the edge in the running game, and all of a sudden they're having all these troubles, and now they're changing schemes and everything else. So, he had a difficult time, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who can set the edge at tight end. And it might be boring and it might not be interesting, but it's important if the Eagles want to run this offensive scheme.
So the offensive scheme then, John, in theory, I mean, when we first heard about the hiring of Mannion and the whole big shift, I mean, we potentially thought, all right, well, not that you're not going to need blockers, but hey, passing offense, West Coast spread. If you're looking again for a blocking tight end, does that insinuate they're not going to change as much, or do you still need great blocking tight ends in any offense? I know that, but it did feel like for a second, all right, well, the priority is going to be a great pass catching tight end, to be able to spread the football around in this new offense that we thought was coming. Does that change your thought process on what might be coming on the offense? How do you see it from that perspective?
Well, they look, they still want you prefer to have George Kittle or somebody like that who can do everything. That's the real goal. That how realistic is that?
Pretty rare, right?
Yeah, pretty rare. Dallas was probably the second tier when it came to that in his prime as a very good receiver and a good blocker. But again, especially run blocking last year really fell from his typical norm. And that showed up because obviously Grant Calcaterra can't do it. And, Kylan Granson can't do it. So once Dallas Goedert falls, to give you an example, so Dallas 28th of the 75 tight ends by PFF, fine. That's fine. That's good. I mean, down from he's typically, if you look at his career, he's 10, 6th, number 6, number 2, number 4, number 16, number 11, and fell to 28. So you see the descent, but that's still good. That's still, a good tight end, 22nd in receiving grade, 69th in run block grade of 83. He really fell.
Yeah, really had a bad year.
From that perspective. And that's what the Eagles need. Now you could piecemeal it, like you draft let's say Eli Stowers, because you don't want to go tight end at 23. So if he falls to the second round pick, you got a receiving tight end, tremendous athlete, great vertical leap, better athlete than Kenyon Sadiq, if you believe the real athletic scores. And then I brought up Charlie Kohler as a blocking tight end in Baltimore as a free agent. Maybe you sign him. You'd need to give him a little bit more money, and the Eagles don't have a ton of money to spend, but just an example of how you could do it. And you have the great blocking tight end, the big time upside as a receiving tight end. All of a sudden you're cooking with gas, but the best case scenario would be George Kittle. But the point is they need somebody who can set the edge in this running game at tight end. And they didn't have it last year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, John, what they end up doing here. I'm looking at the free agent list of tight ends. We went through this before. Any names to you that look like a fit for the Eagles that, it's a tough needle to thread because it's got to be the right cost. It's got to be the right age. It's got to be the right style, all these different things. Any tight end free agents stick out to you? I mean, you got a lot of older tight ends out there. You got David Njoku, who's just about 30 years old. Noah Fant. Foster Moreau, Zach Ertz is out there. He's pretty old. Kylan Granson, as you talked about, an Eagle player. Not that many young tight ends out there. Now, I don't know if they need young. Maybe they'd look for 28, 29 years old. There are a couple options there. But anybody stick out from that list, John, that you think the Eagles could target?
Well, I just mentioned him, Charlie Kohler, man. He's one of the few guys who can legitimately, he's like more of an athletic, tackle. He's not going to, but he's got sure hands too. He's not going to be a volume guy. But he's only 27. He's a blocker. I always say, everybody's looking at Baltimore for tight ends because they always have great tight ends, and they do. But they all want Isaiah Likely because he's the receiver. Well, the Eagles want the blocker. So I'm going after Charlie Kohler. That's his job. That's how he does it. A lot of people have, put 2 and 2 together with John Fitzpatrick, but he's coming off an injury. Same type of thing. I think you look at the blocking guys who are going to be cheaper. They don't make nearly as much money. So somebody like Kohler, he's still young. That's going to be a couple of years ago. Josh Oliver. That's what happened. He might be the best blocking tight end in football. He came from Baltimore, and he got a big deal. Now, the Eagles probably can't spend that kind of money. I don't think Kohler's as good as Oliver, but really good blocking tight end. If somehow they could pull that off, I think that would be a very good signing. That wouldn't excite many people, but it would be very, very important for what they want to accomplish on offense.
And what do you think a player like him would, the Spotrac market value on Charlie Kohler right now is 1.7 million. If our guy JD3 is in here, I think I see him. Spotrac lists, John, they list comparable players under everybody. Well, the first player under the comparable players for Charlie Kohler is Harrison Bryant. Look at that. Harrison Bryant, that name is returned to Birds 365. What do you think Charlie Kohler, John, is worth in the open market?
Well, I think that that's a terrible comp because Harrison's not nearly. This guy's 6'6", 265-ish. I mean, this guy's huge. He's a couple meals away from being a tackle.
They know the comp is more of a contract, so it's not really
contract wise. Yeah, it's contract. He might not make a lot of money, but that's why I bring in Josh Oliver. Like, there's some smart teams who might give him, 3 years, 9-10 million, and then you start talking about. So I think that's a little bit low, but I think Spotrac's been low on everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit low. But you're not going to have to break the bank for the guy because he's.
What do you think of a guy like Isaiah Likely?
He's a receiver. He's a great receiver, but that's what I'm not picking on you, but everybody just draws. Look, it's easier to find a receiver than a blocker, and I know nobody cares about the blocker, but that's what the Eagles need. Like, they can piecemeal it together with the receivers. They'll be fine with the receivers. He's going to be too expensive for the Eagles, Isaiah Likely. They're not going to be in that realm. But he's obviously the bigger name. He's a very good player. He'd be, an upgrade as a receiving tight end, but I think they want to go more cost effective and probably go the draft to find that guy because it's a deep draft for tight ends. We'll see what Ian says about that. But, you have Sadiq. You're probably not going to take him. You have Max Clare. You might take him. Eli Stowers. And even if you don't get those guys, you're down to the Michael Triggs of the world, who can also help. So there's quite a few guys. And, Oscar Delp is one we mentioned. Eli Raritan's more of a blocker, but you could piece it together. Justin Jolie from North Carolina State, Sam Roush from Sam. There's a lot of decent tight ends, and I think you could piecemeal it together with the receiving aspect. But it's really hard to find blocking guys because nobody asked them to block anymore.
Yeah, right.
And they were just a disaster last year when it came to run blocking at the tight end position.
Yeah, Howie is pretty open about he's always liked the pass catching tight ends, but you are right. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't need one that's more versatile than that. We're going to see what they're going to end up doing